Hey everyone, who's more in the right, the protagonist or the antagonist? Say who and why in the comments. Let's get into the full story. He didn't need to say my name out loud, not when he could just drop the smug hint in front of everyone like it was some kind of inside joke. This one's a family affair, Eric said, half turning toward the back row. We've even got compliance watching. My sister, Isla. Just watch, don't speak. The chuckles rolled in like background noise. I didn't react. I sat still, pen in hand, notebook open, just like I was told to do. Not part of the presentation, not part of the team. Just a quiet observer for Stratagem Dynamics' internal compliance board, or more precisely, their watchdog on a leash. My name is Isla Walker. I'm 36 years old. I live in Arlington, Virginia. I work in aerospace compliance for the defense sector. That means I know the rules, and I know when someone's working hard to skip them. Eric was in full pitch mode. He wore that tailored navy suit he always pulls out for military brass and government reps. Sleeves rolled just enough to show he's technical, but polished enough to scream, "Promote me." His voice carried with that perfect mix of authority and excitement. I'd heard it 100 times in video briefs, but watching him live, it felt like a show. Now, what makes this system unspoofable, he said, gesturing to the model interface behind him, is that it doesn't rely on a single signal. It layers. Redundancy, cross-verification, encrypted hashes. You could drop a jammer on it from orbit and it'd still hold steady. Nods, muffled yes from 2 rows up. One Air Force guy whispered something to the woman next to him. She smiled. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. I leaned forward slightly, scanning the live demo feed. The interface rotated a set of projected coordinates in real time. Eric kept talking, but my eyes went straight to the sequence printed top right. Something about the last 4 digits made my brain itch. It looked familiar, not just in the pattern, but the way it repeated. That rhythm. A code we used to solve together in the Detroit Free Press Sunday cryptogram section, years ago. A lazy key substitution, embedded in a way that would look sophisticated if you didn't know what to look for. I narrowed my eyes. That's not an encryption. That's a shortcut. I flipped my notebook and started sketching the key structure on a clean page. The hash he'd just called military grade wasn't random. It was predictable. I'd cracked tougher codes with a ballpoint pen and a glass of orange juice at the kitchen table when I was 12. He built the foundation on a pattern we used to play with as kids, and no one else in the room had noticed. I slid my chair back 2 inches and circled the coordinate block with a red pen. My heart pounded once, not panic. Just the drop before the fall. He thought I'd just sit here, watch, and shut up. He had no idea what I'd just seen. I hadn't thought about those Sunday puzzles in years, but the second I saw that old pattern, it came rushing back like a punch to the gut. We grew up in a small town called Milford, Michigan. 1 grocery store, 3 churches, and nothing open past 8. Sundays were quiet by design. Mom called them clean days, when you were supposed to reset your head and your heart before Monday slapped you in the face. Every week, the Detroit Free Press landed on our porch, and inside it was the thing we both raced for, the cryptogram. It was this coded message buried next to the comics, random-looking letters that actually hit a quote or phrase once you cracked the cipher. Most kids watched cartoons. We decoded substitution patterns and argued over whether E was more likely to be T or A. Eric was 4 years older, so of course he had the upper hand, at least at first. He'd scratch through the columns fast, scribbling guesses, skipping logic. He wanted the win. I wanted the answer. "Done," he'd say, slamming the paper down. Quote by Roosevelt. Mom would take one look and say, "That's not Roosevelt." And that's not done. She'd gently push the paper toward me, and I'd start clean. I didn't rush. I'd go line by line, marking duplicates, tracing patterns. Eventually, I'd land it. Success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. Winston Churchill. He hated that. He really hated when I was right and he wasn't. Dad thought the whole thing was hilarious. "Healthy competition," he said with a grin, nudging Eric's shoulder. "You'll thank her one day." He never did. Our mother was different. She never picked sides. She'd sip her coffee and say, "Use both eyes and your heart, Isla. That's how you see what's really there." I didn't realize back then that she was planting something permanent in me. Eric always needed to be ahead. Grades, sports, everything. If I hit an A, he needed an A+. If I solved a puzzle, he'd claim he solved it first. If he couldn't, he'd scoff like it didn't matter. His pride could take anything but coming in second. Even as kids, the space between us was tight but sharp, like two people sitting on opposite ends of a seesaw, neither willing to move first. By the time I was 12, he stopped doing the puzzles altogether, said they were stupid, said he had real stuff to study. But I kept doing them, every Sunday. Sometimes Mom would sit next to me, silent. Sometimes she'd just leave me a note in the margin. Double check the G's. Years later, I found one of those puzzles tucked in an old book she left me after she passed. Her handwriting in faded blue ink. Trust your method. I carried that with me into every audit, every line review, every whiteboard fight in front of a skeptical engineering team. Not just her words, the whole rhythm of those Sundays. Take your time. Look again. Don't fall for the first answer that makes you feel smart. Eric went the opposite way. Fast answers, big promises, loud certainty. He made it look good even when it wasn't. We never had a blowout fight. Nothing dramatic, just space. More and more of it. Over the years, holidays turned into polite check-ins, then calendar conflicts, then silence. He got louder, I got quieter, but now, staring at that coordinate sequence in the demo room, so familiar, so wrong. It felt like that old Sunday paper was staring back at me. And this time, I wasn't letting it go. The pattern didn't just remind me of childhood puzzles, it reminded me of him, of how far we'd drifted, and exactly where the split started. I took the quiet road. I always did. After college, I landed in regulatory compliance for an aerospace parts supplier just outside Dayton. Not glamorous, but real work. I liked checklists. I liked finding the weak points before they broke something bigger. There was a rhythm to it, like the puzzles, just with higher stakes and fewer second chances. Eric went big from day one. Stratagem Dynamics snapped him up right out of grad school. The emails started coming fast after that. Press releases, product launches, patents. Eric Walker joined special projects. Eric Walker presents to Defense Subcommittee. His name was everywhere like a damn marketing slogan. I watched from a distance. At first, I was proud. Really. He was my brother. But every conversation started to feel like a lecture. He came home that Thanksgiving, the last one before things went sideways, and cornered me at the sink while I was rinsing dishes. "You're still doing internal audits?" he asked, grinning like he already knew the punchline. "God, Isla, that's like reading a dictionary for fun." "Someone's got to make sure the plane doesn't fall out of the sky," I said. He waved it off. Yeah, but it's all theoretical until something fails. I'd rather build than babysit." I shut off the faucet. "I don't babysit, I prevent. That's the difference between your paycheck and your consequences." He didn't like that. He muttered something about low ceilings and left me standing there with a wet sponge in my hand and heat crawling up my neck. From then on, every interaction tightened like a vice. Calls stopped, invites dried up. When our dad got sick a year later, I found out from my aunt, not from him. And when I showed up at the hospital, Eric acted surprised to see me. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "You didn't tell me." He blinked like that hadn't even occurred to him. Our parents passed 3 years apart. After the funerals, there wasn't much left tethering us. No more puzzles, no more holidays, just the occasional headline about some new defense breakthrough with Eric's name in bold font. Meanwhile, I stuck to the slow, quiet work. Compliance review boards, internal audits, policy updates. The kind of thing no one claps for, but everybody panics about when it's missing. Eventually, I got picked up by Stratagem too. Not in engineering, but in their internal systems division. I kept my head down, built a reputation, nothing flashy. Just solid work, clean reviews, zero misses. People trusted me, even if they didn't always know my name. Eric knew it. The year before the demo, I heard from a colleague that Eric had started pushing projects through faster than usual, skipping second phase reviews, leaning hard on marketing to greenlight system launches before tech sign-off. All behind closed doors, of course. That's how it works at Stratagem. You fail upward until someone bleeds. I didn't report it. I had no evidence, and it wasn't my lane. But then came the rumors that Eric's team was promising a navigation system that could outperform satellite interference, that it was jam-proof, spoof-proof, future-proof. The kind of phrases that sound sexy in procurement meetings, but make every compliance officer's skin crawl. Still, I stayed out of it, until I got pulled into a meeting with one of the internal oversight directors. "Off the record," he said, sliding a folder across the table. We just want you to sit in on a demo next month. Eyes only, no action, just watch. I opened the folder, and there it was. Project Atlas, lead, Eric Walker. I didn't ask why they were suspicious. I didn't need to. By then, I already knew how far he was willing to go for applause, and I knew exactly what I'd be watching for. So I watched, sat at the back of the stratagem demo room, pen still in hand, red ink circling the lazy pattern that damn near broke open the whole thing in front of 20 federal guests, and not one of them saw it. Eric ran the room like a TED Talk, walked the floor, flicked through slides, threw in a joke about pilot-proof navigation, got a laugh out of one of the Pentagon liaisons. Behind him, the display showed simulated threat environments, signal jamming, directional spoofing, deliberate misfeeds, all supposedly neutralized by Atlas. He made it look bulletproof, but behind the drama and the buzzwords, I kept seeing cracks. I watched the data feeds more than his face. The logic was off. The fallback algorithm behaved like it was preloaded, not reactive. I knew that behavior. It was pattern reliant, not input reliant. And that's not just risky, it's fake. I scanned the component registry listed in the demo package. One stuck out. An external nav filter tagged Sable Trace Core v1.1, unfamiliar to me. I flagged it on my notepad. Something about that felt off. Stratagem didn't typically use outside modules and nav systems, especially not at the core level. After the lights came up and the applause died down, I kept my head down and packed up slow. I could feel Eric watching me, like he wanted a reaction. He didn't get one. Halfway down the hall, one of the compliance directors, Jensen, tapped my arm. "Gut check?" he asked. I didn't pause. "There's an open door." He nodded once. Understood. No follow-up, no request for detail. Just that look, the kind people give right before they pull a fire alarm but haven't decided yet if the smoke's real. That night, I skipped dinner, kicked off my shoes, and opened my work laptop on the kitchen table. The hum of the fan was the only noise in the apartment. I pulled up the internal system logs tied to the Atlas project and started digging. Phase documentation, approval trails, system inheritance trees. 10 minutes in, my stomach dropped. The Sable Trace module wasn't just unverified. It wasn't cleared at all. It had never passed through internal validation. The only reason it existed in the pipeline was a single fast-track approval dated 4 months ago, signed off by one name, Eric Walker. I pulled the vendor history. Sable Trace had previously been flagged by the Defense Software Integrity Board, once for failure to encrypt fallback logic, once for time drift under packet strain. Both times, the issues were marked unresolved. Eric had overridden the gate with a blanket justification, necessary to meet project milestone, risk within acceptable threshold. Except it wasn't. The fallback wasn't real time. It was a projection based on static assumptions. In flight, that meant an aircraft hit with spoofed GPS wouldn't reroute. It would anchor to a fake signal with no idea it had lost integrity. That's not a red flag. That's a missile. I kept going. Audit trails, test records. Buried in a shared folder was a copy of the validation report. Auto-generated but never finalized. The last page had been doctored. I compared it line by line to the previous version. One field stood out. Status, unverified risk exposure. Change to status, acceptable threshold met. The edit was done in PDF, no change log, no initial, just a ghost of a rewrite. Quiet, deliberate. I sat back, hands flat on the table, heart pounding hard now. This wasn't about family. This wasn't about who won the puzzle first. This was a system flying toward real-world deployment. If a plane crashed because of this, someone like me would be the one doing the backtrace. The one naming the signatures. The one who'd be asked, "Why didn't you say anything?" So I started saving, mirrored the full directory to a secure drive, isolated the edited files, tagged approval IDS, noted timestamps, signatures, test omissions. The chain of custody started with me. I knew what this would cost. Eric's name was all over it, and not in pencil. But I also knew what it would cost if I stayed quiet. And I wasn't about to be part of a cover story that started with a wreckage site and ended in a boardroom apology. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept going. My apartment was quiet, just the buzz of the old floor lamp in the corner and the occasional creak from the hallway pipes. I sat cross-legged on the floor with my laptop open on the coffee table, caffeine from earlier still crawling through my veins, the hard truth spinning out in front of me one file at a time. I started with the Sable Trace core. That's where the rot began. The module was old, barely updated in 3 years, licensed to a subcontractor called Windmere Logic. I'd heard of them, mostly in bad contexts. 2 failures in military-grade encryption filters, both resulting in internal reviews. One flagged for potential contractor fraud. That alone should have triggered a system pause. Instead, Windmere's name was buried 2 layers deep under a stratagem alias partner tag, a shield move. Legal, but dirty. And if you weren't looking for it, you'd never catch it. I pulled every Sable Trace instance linked to Project Atlas. They all tied back to the same early phase module. V1.1 pre, not even a full version, unstable. And yet somehow it had been cleared for full system integration. I opened the internal approval chain. There it was again. Eric's sign-off. Fast track exception approved due to program acceleration schedule. No cosign, no review log, no validation stamp. I knew what that meant. He'd skipped the final gate entirely. I kept digging. Pulled the test batch results. Phase 3 validation. Skipped. Field integrity loop test. Marked as pending. But the report labeled the results as green. The color didn't match the data. I checked the metadata. The file had been edited 3 weeks after the original draft. Same file name, same timestamp range. But one line had been changed. Original, risk profile, unverified logic behavior under high spoof saturation. Edited, risk profile, within acceptable limits under stress test conditions. And that edit? It came from Eric's terminal. I cross-referenced the access logs. He made the change at 2:12 a.m. on a Saturday. Quiet time, off hours, no peer review, no tracking alert. Then I found the email thread. Subject: milestone lock. Final doc submission. From Eric Walker. 2. Product Ops. Compliance Liaison. TechCom. Date: 4 days after the edit, his email read, all systems have cleared threshold benchmarks. Per adjusted schedule, validation certs are attached. We're green for milestone sign-off. Proceed with next funding gate. The attachments were PDFs, flattened. No redline history, scrubbed clean. But I had the originals. Buried in the old backup stratagem, never fully purged when migrating systems last quarter. Most people didn't know those files still existed. I did. I opened a secure storage drive, labeled it Atlas root. Every file went in with full date stamp documentation. Screenshots, hash IDs, source files, approvals, the edited report, even Eric's midnight login metadata. I created a chain of custody spreadsheet and populated every move. No gaps. I sat back for a second. Just one. My eyes burned. My neck ached. But what hit me hardest wasn't the data. It was the name. Eric Walker, lead engineer. Big promises, big shortcuts. And now, big risk. I wasn't naive. Turning this over would end his career. There was no spinning this. No PR cleanup. The guy had signed off on a weapon-grade guidance system using an unvalidated third-party core with a documented history of failure, then rewrote the risk language to push it through a deadline. And I was his sister. But that didn't change the math. We both chose this world. Defense, aerospace, systems that don't get second chances. The difference was I followed the gate. He kicked it open. I saved the final file set and encrypted the drive. Air-gapped the storage. Logged it with time-stamped backup. I knew the chain had to be airtight. Stratagem didn't play soft when something went sideways, especially not with their golden boys. I stared at the folder for a long second, then closed the lid on the drive. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't personal. This was prevention. They scheduled the hearing 2 days later. No press, no public notice. Just an internal calendar invite labeled, Technical Review Panel, Atlas Navigation System. I walked into conference room E406 at exactly 8:57 a.m. 8 people already seated. 3 from engineering oversight, 2 from risk assurance, 1 from legal, 1 government liaison. 1 silent guy I didn't know, but who definitely didn't blink enough. Eric walked in at 9:02, holding a coffee like it was just another morning. We didn't make eye contact. The lead compliance officer, Maria Kent, opened the session with a sharp tone. This is an internal fact-finding review under NDA. No recordings, no assumptions. Evidence only. I nodded once and placed the secure drive on the table. Begin, she said. I opened my laptop, connected the drive, and started screen sharing. This is the risk evolution log of the Atlas Nav core from phase 1 to final milestone, I said. You'll see that the system moved from unverified status to certified green without completing the validation sequence. Slide 1, the system test registry. Slide 2, the module inheritance tree. Slide 3, the Sable Trace subcontractor flag from DSIB. Eric didn't interrupt. Yet, I clicked again. The core logic was based on an unstable module version developed by Winmere Logic, flagged by Stratagem's own vendor filter list for 2 prior failures. A few heads shifted. I kept going. This field here, I zoomed in on the PDF report, was altered between the draft and submission. The phrase unverified risk was replaced with acceptable threshold. There is no accompanying documentation, version history, or validation signature. Eric finally spoke. That was a formatting error, he said, leaning forward. The wording adjustment didn't affect the actual data. I didn't look at him. Then where's the test result that validates that claim? Silence. Maria cut in. Mr. Walker, can you provide the audit trail for the validation sequence? Eric tapped his pen against the table. The test was deprioritized to meet a shifting delivery schedule. We maintained redundancy. The risk profile is theoretical. I clicked again. No, it's behavioral. We simulated spoof drift last night using archived inputs. The core defaulted to anchor position and failed to correct. Under live conditions, that would have translated to course lock-on based on corrupted data. A beat passed. No one moved. Then the government liaison spoke. Is that outcome consistent across variants? Yes, I said. The system isn't reacting. It's assuming. Eric exhaled loud, like we were all wasting his time. Listen. We're talking about a statistical edge case. This isn't real-world critical. Planes are built with multiple nav layers. I snapped the next slide up. This isn't about the plane. It's about the paperwork that landed. Legal started scribbling. Maria's voice dropped. Did you personally approve the use of the Sable Trace core? Eric shrugged. It was already integrated in earlier builds. That wasn't the question. He hesitated. Yes, I approved it. Did you authorize skipping the final validation round? He nodded slower. We had to hit the deadline. Engineering verified functional compliance in-house. I pulled up the access log. This entry shows that you manually edited the final test report at 2:12 a.m., bypassing review. Can you confirm that action? He didn't answer. That silence dragged longer than any argument ever could. No one said anything for at least 10 seconds. Then Maria clicked her pen shut and said, "We're done." They excused Eric from the room first. He walked out stiff, eyes locked straight ahead. The rest of us stayed. 2 hours of follow-ups. Timeline reconstruction, source file verification, chain of custody certification. My drive was duplicated and logged with legal. I signed the form. At 3:14 p.m., Maria made it official. Effective immediately, Project Atlas is suspended pending external audit. Mr. Walker's clearance is revoked, and he is placed on administrative leave until further notice. No ceremony, no emotions. Just the gate, finally closing. I gathered my things, didn't look back. Outside the room, I stood in the hallway alone for a minute, just breathing. I hadn't saved the day, I hadn't scored a win. I'd stopped a system that should have never made it that far. That was it. That was enough. The whispering started before the next Monday even hit. I showed up like normal. Black slacks, ID badge, coffee in hand. Kept my eyes straight ahead through the security gate. But it was different now. People didn't stop me in the hallway anymore. They stopped talking because of me. One guy, systems engineer, level 3, can't remember his name, passed me near the elevators and muttered just loud enough. Snitch. Didn't slow me down. Didn't look at him. Just walked to my desk and opened my laptop. By noon, someone had posted an anonymous message in one of the internal chat channels. Some people will burn the house down to win the family argument. That got yanked by IT inside of 10 minutes, but the damage was already done. Tuesday morning, someone forwarded me a screenshot from a defense industry blog. No names, but the headline said enough. Stratagem insider raises red flag on breakthrough nav system, internal sabotage, or ethical stand. I didn't engage, not once. I did my job, pulled logs, checked metrics, reviewed junior reports. Quiet, steady, boring work. The same thing I've always done. But now, every hallway conversation felt like it was being adjusted mid-sentence when I walked by. Every "how's it going" sounded thinner, lighter. I got called into a side room on Wednesday. Not a formal meeting, just Jensen from compliance and a senior VP from engineering. They didn't apologize. They didn't have to. Jensen said, "You did the right thing." The VP added, "Not everyone will say it out loud, but you probably saved us from headlines that begin with crash." That was it. No memo. No statement, no endorsement. Just a pat on the shoulder and silence. By Friday, someone had left a sticky note on my locker in the break room. No name, just 2 words, scratched in all caps. Ruthless, family. I took it down, tossed it in the trash. I never responded. Not in the chats, not to the side eyes, not to the veiled comments dropped in stairwell conversations. I taught my junior analysts the same way I always had. Red lines, logic mapping, approval integrity. I made them walk their checklists line by line, trace their test data without shortcuts. One of them, fresh out of Georgia Tech, sharp kid, asked me, "Doesn't it get exhausting being the one who always calls it?" I said, "You don't always have to be loud. You just have to be right." They nodded, but I could tell it didn't fully land. It wasn't about being right. It was about being exact. About refusing to flinch when the data tells you what you don't want to hear. Even if it comes with a backlash, especially then. The truth didn't need defense, it needed documentation. Let them gossip, let them tweet, let them drop vague comments in Slack and speculate over lunch. I knew what the audit trail said. And I wasn't interested in defending choices made by someone who bet a safety system on the chance no one would check his math. So I kept my head down. Let the noise pass. Let the facts do the work. And the facts were bulletproof. The ballroom was beige, the coffee was cold, and the crowd looked half awake under the fluorescent lights. I stood behind a podium with a mic that squeaked every time I shifted my notes. Banner behind me read, "Preventable Failures in Mission-Critical Systems." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I'd been asked to keynote the annual Ethics in Engineering Summit in Baltimore. 47 engineers, 30 program managers, 10 officers in uniform, and a handful of contractors in gray suits pretending not to be bored. Midway through my talk, I spotted him. Back row, second seat from the wall, Eric, no title, no badge lanyard, just a legal pad on his lap and a pen in his hand. I kept going. "Failure doesn't come from one broken line of code," I said into the mic. "It comes from a stack of silences, soft edits, dead links, assumptions. No one double-checked. A few heads nodded. One guy actually took notes. Eric didn't move. I didn't call him out. Didn't change my pace. Just walked through every example like I had rehearsed. How small skips turn into large holes. How unverified modules get slipped through under pressure. How no one pushes back when the person skipping steps is the one in charge. Afterward, I hosted a workshop on testing gates. About 20 people showed up, mostly junior engineers, a few compliance folks. Eric slipped in late, didn't speak. I handed out a basic scenario. Unmanned aerial system, faulty altitude feedback loop, early prototype. I walked them through how to write a gate checklist that couldn't be skipped. Not just approvals, but embedded proof. Automated outputs, time-stamped logs, single-point accountability. Eric sat in the back, arms folded, just watching. When it ended, the group cleared out in 2s and 3s. I started packing up my slides, coiling the HDMI cable. That's when I saw him standing next to the table, holding a folder. He didn't say a word, just held it out. I took it. Inside was a system design, clean layout, color-coded testing phases, defined rollback protocols, clear audit trails on every logic component, page after page of slow, steady engineering. No marketing language, no deadline pressure. It was cautious, careful, real. I flipped through 3 pages, stopped at the failure recovery table, and said, "This is solid." He didn't smile, didn't flinch. "But this risk line here," I tapped the bottom of the second chart, "needs to be stronger. You're labeling it acceptable without defining acceptable. That's still squishy." "Nail that down." He nodded once. "Okay. No apology, no excuses, no Big Brother act. Just, okay." We stood there for a second. Neither of us said what we both knew, that this wouldn't fix what happened, and it wouldn't put the pieces back where they were. But it was a step, maybe the first one. He left the room without shaking my hand, and that was fine. The room smelled like dry erase markers and burnt coffee. 8 engineers in folding chairs, 2 officers in uniform, 1 clock ticking loud at the back. I stood at the whiteboard with a black marker in my fist and a red one in my back pocket. The slide on screen said, "Anatomy of a Failure, case number 017, No names, no company, no headlines. Just structure, stripped down. Failure doesn't show up all at once, I told them. It builds. One skipped step, one quiet reword. One person who says, let's just push this through. I drew 4 horizontal bars on the board. Gate 1 through Gate 4. Only the last one had a red X on it. This is the real sequence, I said. On paper, it passed. In code, it didn't. They leaned in. This system was pitched as unspoofable. Sounded great, almost sold. But here's the truth. No system is unspoofable. What matters is how it responds when something does go wrong. I watched their eyes track the X. Failure isn't a mystery, I said. It's math. It's omission, it's pride. A young officer in the second row raised her hand. Do you regret how it ended? The question didn't sting. It was clean. I regret that it involved family, I said. That's all. She nodded once. Another student, nervous guy with a mechanical pencil, asked, what's one habit we should start now? I didn't pause. Write your checklist. Then include the question you're scared to ask, the one that might slow things down, the one that might get you yelled at. Then ask it anyway. They wrote that down. I erased the board slowly, top to bottom. Gate 1, Gate 2, Gate 3. But I left the red X at Gate 4, dragged it with a squeak across the surface. Sharp, deliberate, final. It sounded just like the chalk on those old Sunday papers. I capped the marker and turned to face them. Remember, I said, evidence beats narrative. Every time they stayed quiet, not tense, just focused. I smiled, steady, then walked out.